Hi friends, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another Sketchbook Session video. The following sessions were filmed over several days. The one you're watching right now was filmed a couple of days after the last Sketchbook session in the beginning of September. The sketches you'll be seeing me create are simple mixed media collages. There is a benefit to collaging in a simple mixed media style. Sometimes you just want to make art, but you don't want to use too many supplies or overthink the design, or you're new to this art practice. Also, creating simple mixed media collages are a great way to unwind from your day. Just the act of getting paint or gluing paper onto the page is a great way to de-stress. You can use supplies that you have on your desk that are readily available. You don't need expensive materials to work in your sketchbook, or you can use it to test out new supplies to see how they work and look. As you just saw, I applied the paint using a small brayer. This is a good example of trying different paint applications. I have used this technique before, but I wanted to show it again to encourage you to give it a try. You can see how messy I'm being as you watch me glue the paper scraps to the page. I don't always apply matte medium to the front of the paper. I understand the benefits of sealing the paper for preservation, so I'm trying to remember to do it. To be honest, it isn't a necessary step to do in the sketchbook. I'm doing it now so it'll become a habit. I add varnish to my collages that I sell, but sealing it with matte medium is a good first step. I'll add music while you watch me finish both collages and come back once they're completed. Here are the finished simple mixed media collages with vertical compositions. Both are a bit messy, and that's okay. It's a good reminder to me to loosen up as I create. Let's look at the grayscale versions, mostly light to mid-tone with a few dark value elements. Here are the muted color palette scraps I pulled for the next two sketches. I don't always limit myself to the scraps I initially pulled. I give myself some leeway to pull more scraps if necessary, especially if the majority of scraps are mid-tone value. In my last video, I reviewed the cruciform composition collages that I've created over the past few years. I noticed that I use a lot of mid-tone values. That's something I'd like to change. I would rather have a larger amount of light or dark values because I think it makes the artwork more visually pleasing. For the ground layer of these two collages, I'm applying paint with a damp shop towel. You don't have too much control over the paint application, which can be fun to try in a sketchbook. Experimenting with different painting ground techniques is something that I want to work on. It can be a fine line of having an interesting ground layer, but not too much that it will take the focus away from the paper collage on top of it. My loose plan for these two collages is for each one to have large elements in relationship to the substrate. Not too many, but incorporating enough that there's a good design and leaving enough of the ground layer showing. Instead of using matte medium for the collages going forward, I brought out Mod Podge. I only had a small amount left in the jar, so I wanted to use it up. I love the papers that have multiple colors on it for the collage on the left. These papers were created when I wiped off paint from a brayer when monoprinting. You can create beautiful textures and color combinations with this technique. I had an idea for a shape that I wanted to use. After I cut it and placed it in a few different locations, I realized it was too big for the design. The piece that was cut away is a different shape, but it fits better with this design. The collage needed a different color than the ones I've already used. I was looking for a red paper that would add an interesting detail to the design. This paper was made by pressing large bubble wrap on a gel plate, then pulling a print of the pattern. I love the shape as is, so I decided not to cut it. Here are the finished collages, outside my usual style, but I really like both. I used to think this design style made the elements look like they were floating on the page, but my opinion is starting to change. I'd like to further explore this design style. Here's the grayscale version. You can see that the values are mostly light and dark. This sketching session was filmed recently, right after I made 2 videos on using leftover scraps and collages, and after I pulled out most of the scraps from the container to include in ephemera packs for my Etsy shop. There weren't too many scraps left over in the container. These scraps were in a separate packet in the container that I keep cut geometric shapes. I do this so it's easier to find these scraps and to keep them from getting damaged. As you probably guessed, both of these collages will have geometric designs. Once again, I'm painting both ground layers. I'm mixing off-white and red to get a light muted color for the collage on the left. I'm using a plastic card to apply the paint. It's another way to apply paint in a loose, less controlled manner. I initially separated the scraps into 2 piles, one for each page, but as you'll see soon, I pulled a scrap from the right side pile for this left collage. Also, I'm trying not to cut too much of the geometric scraps to keep the original shape. I'm being mindful not to glue the paper elements too closely to the gutter of the sketchbook. I don't want the edges to get damaged when it's closed. I decided not to use any of the orange scraps because I didn't think the color would look good with the other elements already glued in place. I went back into the leftover scrap container and pulled this brown pattern paper. It took a few cuts to get the shape of this brown element the way I wanted it. The first cut angle was too severe looking. It needed to be softened. Both collages needed more elements to fill in the empty spaces. I pulled this dark green paper from my stash of larger color papers. I decided on green because there was already 2 green elements in both collages. I thought it'd make each collage too busy looking if a new color was introduced at this point. I'm happy with the way these 2 collages turned out. It has recaptured my interest in exploring geometric collages. Here's the grayscale version. High contrast between light and dark values with a minimal amount of mid-tone values. I encourage you to have a sketchbook practice if you don't already have one. It's a great place to play, de-stress, and test supplies. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.